Ladies and gentlemen, here we are for another Honkai Impact character analysis. We've just finished our full stuff of HSR and I want to jump in to get Susannah out of the way. Now, Susannah is a character coming in the next patch of Honkai Impact after we've had the conclusion of part 1 of all of Honkai's story. We're getting Susannah as a character, for those who obviously didn't know, and Susannah is easily summarized as a bleed physical character. We're going to go through this whole thing that I've written up, kind of highlighting main points and talking about the main features, and then by the end, we're going to be going through the stigma and the weapon active, as well as kind of like suggesting a gameplay loop and some good alternative stigmas if you don't have her signature. So let's get this started by starting from the top. Lead skill, physical damage, and against bleeding enemies. As I said, she's a bleeding character, so she's going to synergize well with just any application of bleeding. So physical and bleeding. Passive 1, all damage dealt by Susannah counts as bleed damage. If these highlighted ones are here just to kind of point out an important thing about this specific section. And so all damage dealt by Susannah is bleed, but the thing to note down is bleed does not count as melee or ranged and cannot crit. So the actual application of the bleed and the tick of the bleed doesn't really scale with any of these. It only would scale with physical, if I was to name one that it can scale with. But moving onward, the weapon active tosses out a chakram to form a drum, and a button prompt will appear. Susannah is actually easily described as well as a kind of rhythm character. She's a very, very unique character, and you have a rhythm mechanic. So once you press your weapon active, she'll essentially give you a button prompt, and you have to press it either at a perfect note or a normal note. Your damage is increased if you play perfectly, so obviously try to play the beat in time with the actual visual. So bear that in mind. And then after casting weapon ultimate, reset weapon cooldown rather. On perfect note hit during either weapon ultimate or weapon active, if the enemy is afflicted with bleed, just deal more damage. There's a massive kind of like push for playing perfect in notes, so I think everyone should remember that, is when you get this character, the game is going to encourage you to play perfect notes, which is not too difficult. The game is not asking you to play like Guitar Hero 10-star difficulty through the fire and flames. It's nothing like that. It's just simple rhythm notes that you have to play in time. I think it's like during the weapon active, it's 1 note, and during the ultimate, it's 5 notes, so it's nothing too crazy. But moving on, after casting the weapon active, gain total damage 40%, and enemies receive 20% more bleed damage, specifically lasts 15 seconds, and is refreshable. And that is going to be the main focus of almost everything, is just bleed damage or her own physical, as Susannah is a main DPS. Third one, after weapon active, skill triggers a perfect note, restore 6 SP, and gain 55 physical damage, last 15 seconds. Again, important, 6 SP is a nice bonus as well for playing a perfect note, so bear that in mind. And then bleed damage deals extra 2 damage against shields that take fixed damage. This one is a bit more for the hit, I believe, the best way I can describe it is the hit count shields, I believe. It's the shields that you have to hit a specific amount of times, and bleed will deal an extra 2 hits against those types of shields. And any shield that takes a fixed number of hits, bleed counts as 2, so it's kind of a nice bonus. It's not that crazy though. Moving onwards, evasion introduces another mechanic that we have to remember. So obviously you just deal a bunch of damage with your evasion, and you also recover 200 confidence points. This has a 15-second cooldown. But the confidence points is something that we have to keep note and also keep track of where we get them from. I'll also outline that in the general gameplay section. Now, the ultimate evasion, 150 confidence points. Ultimate evasion can connect up to the 3rd basic attack sequence. And after triggering the ultimate evasion, you'll also heal for 300 HP. And this is a very cool mechanic here that we've actually, or I didn't discover, it's here rather, that I found very interesting. Is it's a toggleable kind of a little passive. So the toggleable part of it is weapon active triggers evasion skill, which is actually a very good thing, by the way. If you get this character, always make sure to have this toggled on. It'll just make your life a lot easier. Essentially, you can get 2 things done with 1 button press. You can just press your weapon active, and it'll trigger your recovery of confidence points that comes from here, as well as any that may or may not come from your weapon active. So just bear in mind that you can toggle this, and I'd recommend toggling it on. Moving down, basic attack. Nothing too crazy here. If you want to look at the percentages, by all means, go for it. But one thing to note is that all your basic attacks apply, or rather gain you 50 confidence, and then the last one gains you 4 points of bleed trauma on the enemy. So it's nice there. Remember that. The percentages aren't important, but you do want to use your basic attack sequence to recover confidence points, because they are important to be gathering all the time. The QTE trigger is time slow and bleed, which is fine. Usually, I think I like characters that have 3 because I am currently enjoying playing the new Hersha of Origin and Hersha of Flamesire, and they have 3 to themselves, I believe. But regardless, time slow and bleed, and seeing as they're both SP characters, the ones that you can synergize in your head, which is Griseo and Susannah, both of them are bleed. This is actually not going to be too hard to pull off, even if you are a completely free-to-play player and a completely new player, so just bear that in mind. Furthermore, you deal damage. If the enemy is bleeding, deal another bunch of damage, and then gain 100 confidence points and apply 4 points of bleeding. Just more confidence points. This is all going to come into like play here at the end, where we have to actually like see where we get all our confidence points and see how many we need in total. Moving on though, number 3 for this section. When basic attack sequence 4 hits an enemy, additionally 100 confidence points. That's fine. Section 4, or point 4. After using QTE, combo attack, or ultimate, the team gains a stacking bleed status. I'm not sure if this is a filler name, but that is the name that I found. You gain that status, and then max bleed stacks that can be applied is increased by 4 stacks. This is very good, by the way. It means that your overall like damage ticks are going to be much higher, and you're going to get more frequency, essentially. And then for each bleed stack now, deal 15% attack or physical damage every 0.5 seconds. Last 5 seconds, refreshable, and then apply 6 points of bleed trauma after using your ultimate. A lot of bleed is here, a lot of bleed statuses, and this is actually a really cool step in a different direction for Mihoyo. Going for a more bleed build, as I believe Griseo is like one of the only other bleed characters in the game. There's not that many bleed characters in the game, and Susannah being a main DPS SP character that you can get for free. Not her gears, by the way, you can't get her gears for free, but you can get her for free just through grinding the game systems. Moving on though, the ultimate. After using her ultimate, Susannah enters a dancing state. You deal a bunch of damage to all enemies and deal a quantum collapse, as Susannah is quantum. You'll then be presented with 5 button prompts in a specific order. It's essentially going to go from left to right on your screen. You'll be just told what button to press at what times. And if you play a perfect note, you'll deal a bunch more damage. And if you deal a normal note, you'll deal slightly less damage than the perfect note. So it's not too dependent on playing perfect notes, but that extra 50% overall attack or physical is gonna be pretty important if you go like speed running certain things and whatnot. So try your best to play perfect notes. The bare minimum is just to hit the note itself. I'm pretty sure you can miss it if you just don't press the note at all. But yeah, do try to play perfect notes, at least in the ultimate. Next, the ultimate does not stop time. Now, this is an important one to note down. The ultimate does not stop time. It's a suspended animation. I didn't really know the difference between these until I read it in Marissa Honkai's video about this, where I got all this information, essentially. But yeah, it has a suspended animation, only stopping time during Memorial Arena. In all the other game modes and in Elysian Realm and all this stuff, you don't stop time. You just kind of suspend the animations of the enemy. If you will, it's the difference between something like an Aponia ultimate as well, or an Eden ultimate, where in one of them time flows even though the enemies have stopped, and the other one time is completely stopped. So that's the difference between the two. And Susannah has the suspended animation one, just the enemies being paused essentially, unless it's a Memorial Arena, which is outlined here. So next one, number 2, toggleable, diversify the button used for prompts. Now this one doesn't hinder your performance. Please note this. When you toggle this one on, this does not hinder your performance. This does not alter your damage. This does not alter anything to do with the outcome of your button presses. What this does do is makes it so each button press will be a different button. Diversify the button used for them. Without this, I can assume that it's always going to be the same buttons. It's like if you have this toggled off, it's going to always be, for example, hypothetical, it's always going to be ASDF G. But if you do press this, you can maybe get a different combo of D, A, S, F, G one time, and then a different combination of those letters another time. So bear that in mind, that's all this does. It's not a performance increase or a performance decrease, but maybe it is a performance decrease if you don't actually, if you're not very good at visual cues and essentially sight reading per se. So just bear that in mind, it's not an actual performance increase or decrease. Moving onwards though, number 3, ultimate physical damage increase and also perfect note dependency. Your ult gains additional total damage plus 50%. So always play perfect notes. At least try to do one perfect note per ultimate. I think it's a bare minimum, and it's going to give you a massive bonus. And also once we get into other things, it's going to be a massive bonus as well. So, number 4, during ultimate, when a perfect note is triggered, obviously perfect note, gain additional SP and HP. So, there's a massive dependency on playing perfect notes. Obviously, try to, but if you can't, it's fine. Moving on then. Combo attack, Susannah gains confidence points using various attacks. Now we're coming into the confidence points spending section. So you have a max of 600 confidence points, and then at 600, you hold the attack to use the combo. Your combo does a bunch of damage and throws a gem attack that deals a bunch more damage, and also applies 8 points of bleed trauma. So it's just a bunch of confidence point spending to deal a bunch of damage. It's nothing too crazy. Against enemies, bleeding enemies, the combo attack does more damage. It's just kind of standard. I'm not going to really harp on about it. And then when combo attack hits, Susannah gains 15 SP. Susannah, here's the thing. One thing I've noticed, because I believe this is the end of the section for her main kit, one thing I've noticed throughout this whole kit is that Susannah has a lot of her own SP regeneration, and even when we get to the Stigma as well as her weapon, there's a lot of SP regeneration that goes on in there, so it's quite nice. This character may not have a dependency on any character other than like a bleed application from someone else to trigger a QTE, because the QTE is quite important for this character. But other than that, the character does not really have a dependence on anything, which is actually very, very good. You don't really want hyper-dependent characters all the time, because then you get into a very pay-to-win kind of game. So this is quite nice to see. Moving on though, we have the rank up section. Usually, S-rank characters have a super long rank up section where you have the S and the S1 and the S2 and then the double S and so on and so forth. Well, SP characters don't really have all that in-between stuff. They just have the major ranks getting things. And so, what do you get? This is a very important one, by the way. But what do you get at A rank, which is where the character is starting, right? That's where these A rank or SP characters actually start. They start at A rank, and you have to get them all the way up. But obviously, because they are grindable through the game systems, you can get them to double S or triple S very easily. But the first one, A rank, is very important, by the way. After entering the field or using an ultimate, all enemies on the field enter a died state for 15 seconds. What does that mean? Well, died enemies only suffer bleeding damage from the last Valkyrie that inflicted died state. To summarize that, it essentially means that the character or the Valkyrie that applied the died state usurps and steals all bleed application ownership, essentially. So here's the example. If you're running a Griseo and you use her skills to apply bleed, which is what Griseo does, if you do that, Griseo applies, let's say, 5 stacks of bleed onto the enemies. If you switch to any other character that isn't Susannah, those bleed stacks would stay Griseo's. They would stay Griseo's and they'd be scaling with Griseo's damage. But if you do the thing with Griseo, applied 5 stacks of bleed, and then you switch to Susannah, Susannah will apply the died state, and those bleed stacks will now act as if Susannah had applied them. And they'll scale with Susannah, which is very good, seeing as Susannah is the main DPS bleed character. So this is why I said he only valid for Susannah and Griseo teams, as those are the only 2 characters that I know that apply bleed, and will make the bleed damage scale with Susannah, which is very important, by the way. As we've noticed, Susannah has a lot of bleed damage build up, or bleed damage kind of buffing. So this is a very good touch, and thankfully they did this without it having to be like suggested as like an idea. So very good job there, Mahoyo. Moving onwards, S rank, after entering the field, self bleed damage plus 12%, nice little bonus. Double S, after casting ultimate, you charge 25% more bleed trauma last 15 seconds, just more bleed trauma application, which is fine. And then triple S, bleed damage plus 15% total damage. That's all great, honestly, because you get the character at A rank. It's just you already got the most important piece. Other than that, just get the character to whatever level you want. It's just small damage increases. Obviously, double S is not a damage increase, but it is a consistency increase. So yeah, there's no really like recommended level, seeing as the character is grindable. So I'm not going to try to recommend it. You just get the character to triple S because it's grindable. You can grind the character there. So that's really all there is to it. Going on though to the weapon active. The weapon active is a bit of a weird one because it has a few things that I've not seen in a weapon active before, but fair enough. The weapon is called the Shadow Streamer Shining Flower. Kind of an interesting name. I will say that I think her weapon looks the best out of a lot of the weapons that we've had in recent days. I think Susannah's Chakram weapon looks incredible. So going on to it though, the weapon active cooldown, max charges, and effects are all based on the wielder type. I'm not sure what they mean by this. I really don't. I've never seen them say this in a weapon, so it is what it is, but I guess it's based on the wielder's type, so maybe if it's imaginary, it's different or something. I'm not sure. But regardless, self-bleed damage plus 15, and then The equip bonus for Susannah is entering a drumming state and generate resonance waves, deal a bunch of damage of bleed, and gain excited status for 15 seconds. During the excited status, all enemies on the field receive 10% more bleed damage. So just a bit more bleed boosting in all areas of the world. Great. Passive 1 of the weapon, self total damage plus 15%, fine. Valkyrie Valkyrie Steam equip bonus, which is Susannah. Your ultimate gains total damage plus 20% on perfect rhythm, max 5 stacks, lasts until ultimate ends. This is another area that is very important to be learning perfect notes, as you have a stacking buff effect to get from playing perfect notes in a row. Now, if you can't do it, normal rhythm gains 80% effect of a perfect rhythm, so you'll essentially, the total 100% that you can get from the full 5 rhythm notes, or 5 perfect rhythm notes, which is obviously because there's 5 notes, 20%, 5 times 20 is 100, you'll just get 80%, right? So it's not a massive detriment, really it isn't, but it's perfect notes are going to be a massive bonus. Upon casting ultimate though, and weapon active, inflict 5 points of bleed trauma on all enemies on the field, so easy application of all the things. And then passive 2, total damage plus 8, during excited state, self-damage, physical plus 10%. It's fine. Passive 2 is this is obviously the pre-arm stuff, so it's not going to be an incredible bonus, but it is a nice bonus in the end if you're going to go for the higher percentages in the Abyss and or Memorial Arena. But that's that. The weapon active, or the weapon is quite good. One thing to note though, the weapon isn't going to be a super high dependency for Susannah. Obviously, there's no other physical bleed chakrams in the game, so it's going to be hard to find a chakram that is good for her. But just note that everything that you see here is just for damage. There's no gameplay dependency. That's really all there is. There's no gameplay dependency. It's just kind of a nice bonus, unless I misinterpreted something as this Valkyrie Steam bonus on the first passive here, and this is meaning that this is the only way to do the drumming, which it isn't, because it wouldn't make sense word-wise. But there is no actual gameplay dependency, much like the other 2 purchases that were released recently, where their weapons are super important to their gameplay loop. But now, moving on to the Stigma. The Stigma is nothing crazy, I'll be honest with you. It's just kind of like a generic bleed physical. There's nothing super crazy. You'll just get physical damage, ultimate bleed damage, team physical damage against bleeding enemies, a host attack inflicts more bleed, total damage plus 15, enemies receive more bleed damage. It's kind of generic. There's nothing super crazy. The only crazy part is that there's a 2 on the 2 set. There is a Susannah equip bonus, which I don't think I've ever seen on a actual Stigma set. So you'll have team bleed damage plus 20%, but then Susannah equip bonus, but weapon active and ultimate gain total damage plus 80. So I've never seen a Stigma set have a character equip bonus, but there it is. You'll get a massive boost to your active and or your weapon active and your ultimate through the 2 set, which maybe that'll be a bit of a dependency, who knows. But the 3 set, physical damage plus 18 and combo attack plus 30. When the host is on field, bleed damage recovers 1 SP, cooldown 1 second. This last part is kind of important. It's SP regeneration, so obviously you maybe want this one, but regardless, the Stigma set is not going to be a make or break of this character, and honestly, the weapon is always going to be the most important thing, but even then the weapon is not overly crazy. Obviously, for damage wise it is, but gameplay loop and gameplay wise, not so much. Just bear that in mind when looking at the character. And that is essentially the character and her signature things. As always, the signature stuff for the character is gonna be the best stuff for the character. There's no argument about that. Obviously, you're gonna want to get the weapon if you're gonna want the best version of Susannah. And you're gonna want to get the Aladdin Stigma, because that's the name of it, the Aladdin Stigma, if you're gonna want the best version of Susannah. But there is other alternatives obviously out there. As for weapons, not really. Weapons is a tough one, because weapon, you need the weapon to be specifically a physical. There has been no physical chakram characters other than Susannah, and it's going to be needing to cater towards bleed, which there hasn't been any bleed chakram users. So the weapon, there's really no alternative apart from just chucking on any high attack weapon, really. You're not going to be able to find a good substitute, but that's potentially fine. That's maybe not a terrible thing, because, well, the character's free, so maybe you'll be able to roll on the Stigma set if you really want this character. As for the Stigma, well, I'll go down to the section where I recommend a few before we get into the gameplay loop. You have a few options. Susannah is Griseo's signature one, and it's probably going to be your best substitute because it's a bleed-dependent physical boost. I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but that's kind of the general gist of it, is that there's a bleed-dependent physical boost, and so obviously Susannah is a bleed physical character, so it's going to be your best alternative. But other than that, if you have the Evangelion collab, which not probably a lot of people do, you probably could use this one. I just looked at it briefly, and it's a lot of single-target physical stuff. It's not going to be good for AoE, but it probably would work. But the most universal one, most likely, is going to be your Dirac. This one is craftable. It's a G3 physical, and there would be no problems with using this one, as if essentially once you have the 3 set, you just have to use the character and you'll get all the buffs, right? Pressing your ultimate, pressing your skill, pressing your dodges, all that stuff, that you'll just get a bunch of bonuses to universal physical damage. And seeing as physical damage is bleed damage, essentially, they go hand in hand. There's no part that doesn't say that they don't, unlike the first part where melee and ranged isn't bleed. Dirac would be a nice substitute. So that is that. For stigmas, and like I said, weapons, there's no alternative apart from her own, so use whatever you have at hand that is the highest attack. Now, let's zoom in here a bit for the general loop. This is a general loop that is, I think, pretty good and isn't weapon dependent. So, and it's also quite straightforward. It depends on one thing at least, is being able to pull off a QTE with the character. That's pretty much all it depends on. If you can't pull off a QTE with the character, which is time slow or bleed, then it's unfortunate, but that is a pretty core part of this so far. So, with the gameplay loop, you're going to enter the field with a Susannah QTE, which is going to give you 100 confidence points, right? Then you're going to cast your weapon active and trigger ultimate evasion, which is going to give you 200 plus 150 confidence points, and you're going to want to play the weapon active perfect rhythm note that is going to appear when you do this. Just play it as perfect if you can. If you can't, again, you got to lose out on some things like a bit of damage bonus and potentially some SP, but obviously it's not going to make a huge impact on your gameplay. It's just going to be the outcome of your damage. Step 3, then you have to normal attack until 600 confidence, seeing as we're now at a roughly, what is this, 100 plus 250, which is 350, sorry, at 450 confidence. You just have to normal attack for just a moment. I think it's just one full four attack sequence will do the job. After that, you get to cast your combo attack, which is just standard. You spend your confidence points to use a combo attack. Cast your ultimate, play all 5 notes in perfect rhythm, and you have applied massive amounts of bleed and dealing massive bleed damage. It's a simple, straightforward gameplay loop. I'm not going to try to act like it's anything more than that. It's very straightforward. The character is an SP character, so they're not going to be super in-depth either. But one thing to take away from this is that Susannah is an interesting character. Let me zoom out here. By all means, and this, by the way, as I just said earlier, this does not matter what you're using. This is going to be your gameplay loop with her in general, because all the things that she gains from here are all things that are naturally in her own kit. They're not weapon dependent like Herschel Finality, where she's weapon dependent on her finality stack gaining or whatever. This is all internally on Susannah, so no matter what you put on her, this is going to be your gameplay loop. So, hope that's helpful. That is the end of the Susannah analysis, by the way. She's going to be a pretty cool character. I think she's going to be probably everyone's go-to physical character for just the reason of her being so accessible. She's the first SP DPS, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember all the SP characters. But she's the first SP DPS character that you can get that is going to be pretty good at her job. What weeks are you going to use her on? Probably any weeks that she's valid on bleed, physical, or quantum. She's going to be a nice one to have there. If she is going to be better than the other ones, that's probably not going to happen because the other ones are all S-rank characters for their respective roles. But Susannah is going to be a nice substitute for the players who can't invest into the big boys. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys like Susannah. I'm actually kind of excited for her, even though I've spent all my gems trying to get Herschel of Truth, and I'm depressed. But hopefully you guys enjoy her if you do get her, and hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy, like, subscribe, and if there was any critique and anything wrong with this, by all means, please note it down in the comments. I'll try to improve in the future. Have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.